Hey guys, what's going on? My name's Daniel and welcome to my channel where I teach people just like you how to do more things for and by yourself. In today's video, I'm doing another hard cider, but it is going to be a ginger flavored hard cider. I recently had a ginger flavored hard cider and personally I was left lacking. Whenever I have a ginger beer or a ginger ale, I always look for the brand that does not hold back the heat. Ginger can really bring a lot of kick and a lot of spice to whatever beverage you're making. And so I want to try and make a ginger flavored hard cider that has a little bit more kick than what I previously had. Before I dive into the video and show you guys how I'm gonna make 1 gallon of ginger flavored hard apple cider, I wanna remind you that if you're looking for the recipe, if you're looking for the directions, if you just wanna read along, if you're looking for links for any useful products, they're all down in the description below. If you're having a good time on this channel and you wanna see this channel grow and you wanna see more videos in the future, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Now that I got all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and make 1 gallon of ginger flavored hard apple cider. So for today's cider, I'm actually going to be using a brewing bucket because I'm going to have my ginger in a cheesecloth bag and I'm going to let it sit in there for a few days before I pull it out because I really want that spicy ginger flavor to kick in. All of the ingredients that I'm using for this recipe is 1 gallon of farm fresh apple cider. I make sure that there's no preservatives in it. It is pasteurized, which is perfectly fine, but preservatives will stop your fermentation cold in its tracks. I'm also going to be using Safale S-04 Ale yeast. If you've been following along with my videos, then you know that I've been on a Safale S-04 Ale yeast kick when it comes to my ciders. And so once again, I'll be using Safale S-04 Ale yeast. Then I'm going to be using 1 pound of sugar. My very first cider that I ever made, I added 1 pound of sugar to bring the alcohol content to around 7 or 8%. And I found that really added a lot to the flavor. It added to the sweetness, it added to the alcohol content. It just added to everything in a very positive way. So for this recipe, I'm going to go ahead and add 1 pound of sugar. Last but not least, I'm going to be using some rough chopped ginger that I got from the grocery store to make my ginger flavored hard apple cider. Now I don't have an exact measurement for how much ginger I'm going to use. I'm probably going to start out with a cup, maybe a cup and a half, or maybe I'll just throw the whole bowl in because like I said, the last ginger flavored hard apple cider I tried left me wanting more ginger. But if you're looking for a good place to start, I would say start with 1 cup, and if you want a little bit more ginger, 1.5 cups of that ginger. So those are all of the ingredients. We have our cider, we have our sugar, we have our ginger, we have our yeast. It's a super simple recipe, and the method also is not too complicated. And like I said, both the recipe and the method are down in the description below. So now that you know all the ingredients you're going to need, the equipment you're going to need, I'm going to be using a 2-gallon brewing bucket to brew my 1 gallon of hard apple cider. I'm going to be using a hydrometer and a graduated cylinder to check my specific gravity, even though I pretty much already know what it's going to be at with 1 gallon of cider and 1 pound of sugar. But I like to see what my specific gravity is at just so I can keep track of the fermentation. I'm also going to be using an airlock and a cheesecloth bag. Now that we're getting into the how-to of this how-to video, let's take these ingredients into the kitchen and start making our hard apple cider. All right, so the first thing that I did is I just put my ginger in my cheesecloth bag. I'm gonna go ahead and tie a knot in it. Rough chopped, this came out to be about 2 cups. Like I said, if you're looking for some kind of specific amount, I would say that probably 1 to 1.5 cups will do you right. But as I already said, I'm trying to get a bigger kick from the ginger in this specific recipe. So I'm gonna go ahead, I have this all tied up, and then I'm going to take my pot, I have it on the burner, and I'm going to pour some apple cider directly into the pot. And so while I have this on the stove top, I'm gonna do 2 things. I'm gonna stir in and melt in and dissolve my 1 pound of sugar, which is gonna be 2 cups of sugar. And then I'm also going to steep my ginger. So let's go ahead and throw that sugar in. You absolutely do not need to dissolve your sugar on the cooktop. It's just that I'm already heating up some hot apple cider, so I figured this was just a convenient time to do it. What I normally do is I take the sugar and put it directly into my brewing bucket and just stir it up because that will do the trick. While this is on the cooktop, I'm going to go ahead and pour my cider into the brewing bucket just so that I'm doing something. As much as you can, keep the contents of your bucket protected from anything that could possibly contaminate it. Okay, so I'm stirring this up, and then I'm gonna go ahead and throw that bag of ginger in there. You know, my line of thinking is that ginger's in a lot of teas and they steep really well. And so I figured that even though the flavors will be extracted while they're fermenting, I thought it might be a good idea to kind of let it cook for a few minutes just to get some of the flavors out. And also, since I rough chopped this ginger and I didn't really have any special method of sanitizing it, bringing this up to a boil real quick should kill all of the potentially harmful yeast and bacteria on the ginger. All right, so I managed to bring it to a boil just for like one brief second, and then I took it off the burner. One thing to look out for is with all the sugar in here, make sure it doesn't boil over and get everywhere like I just did, because that becomes a messy cleanup. But as soon as you get some bubbles, feel free to take it off, and I'm gonna let this steep for a few minutes before I put it in with the rest of the cider. Okay, I'm not gonna pretend that there's some magical way to perform this step, but keep the juice inside the bucket. That's all the advice I have. And then give her a real good stir. That ginger, the scent of the ginger is so strong and it smells so good. I definitely think that ginger and apple goes together really well. So the next two steps we're going to do is we're going to take our specific gravity reading, we're going to add our yeast, we're going to close this bad boy up, and then we're going to add our airlock. All right, so we're going to go ahead and take our specific gravity. This is 1 gallon of cider with 1 pound of sugar, so this should come out around 8% if I am guessing correctly. So after letting this cool down to room temperature, because your temperature does affect the specific gravity, I was right, it's right around 1.058, which gives you around 8%. Not exactly perfect, but close enough. So now we're gonna go ahead, add this back in there. I'm definitely gonna take a sip. The spicy ginger flavor adds so much to just, this is non-fermented, this is just apple cider and ginger, but the ginger flavor adds so much to the flavor profile, and I'm so excited to see how this thing turns out whenever it's fermented. Not as spicy as I was hoping, but this is gonna sit here for a while, so we'll see how much it does. All right, now the most important part, adding in our half a teaspoon of Safale S-04 Ale yeast. Then we're going to throw the lid on and the airlock. Okay, that's the yeast. Here's the lid. I want to make sure that that's on real well. And then I'm going to go grab an airlock. I'll be right back. Le piece de resistance, the airlock. There we go. So the airlock's going to keep any bad things from going inside, like gnats, and it's going to allow, as this expands, the CO2 to come out. I'm going to be checking the specific gravity of this in about a week. I only want this to sit in a bucket for so long because I prefer for them to ferment inside of a carboy. So in about a week, after the ginger's been able to release all of its delicious flavors, I'm going to rack this over to a carboy where it will sit until it is completed fermenting. What that means is that whenever I do a hydrometer reading, checking for specific gravity, it's going to read around 1.000, and I'm also going to give it some time for the particulates to settle down to the bottom so I get a clearer quality. Whenever fermentation is complete and the particulates settle, I'm going to then bottle this ginger flavored hard apple cider. But before I bottle it, I'm going to add about 1 cup of apple juice, which is going to be what I use for my priming sugar, which will carbonate it in the bottles, because that extra sugar that hasn't been fermented yet will be fermented inside the bottles, which will cause the release of CO2, but since it's trapped inside the bottle, it'll expand and carbonate the beverage. That takes generally 2 to 3 weeks. But then I also let it sit for a bit longer to allow the flavor profile to develop. So after today, we could feasibly have a fully bottled and carbonated ginger flavored hard apple cider in about a month, but I'm going to take it a little bit slower, and so it'll probably take 2 to 3 months for me to have a final finished product. If you want to see how this ginger flavored hard apple cider turns out, you definitely want to subscribe because I do a tasting video whenever my ciders are done. Thank you guys so much for being here as I try new things. This is the first time I'm doing a ginger flavored hard apple cider, but I'm fairly confident in how the flavors are going to turn out. I'm really hoping that I've been encouraging you all to try new and different things. If there's a flavor that's in your mind, if you tried a professional cider that you want to try what they made, go ahead and go for it. You don't need a perfect recipe. Just kind of think what would bring out those flavors, throw it all together and see what happens. If you're having a great time on this channel, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. It's the little things like liking and commenting that really allows my channel to grow so that videos like this get out to more viewers. Also, if you subscribe, you'll be able to stay tuned for future videos, like whenever I actually finally taste this ginger flavored hard apple cider. I can't wait to see what I'm gonna do next time, but until then, happy brewing.